Sophia Chen stood before the ornate mirror in the bridal suite of the Grand Millennium Hotel, her reflection showing everything she had dreamed of becoming. The ivory silk dress hugged her petite frame perfectly, its delicate lace sleeves and pearl buttons creating an image of timeless elegance. Her dark hair was swept into an intricate updo adorned with her grandmother's vintage hairpins, and the soft makeup enhanced her natural beauty without overwhelming her delicate features. Today was supposed to be the culmination of 2 years of planning, the day she would marry Marcus Williams, the charming investment banker who had swept her off her feet during her final year of graduate school. Their relationship had been a whirlwind of expensive dinners, weekend getaways, and promises of a future filled with love and success. "You look absolutely radiant," her maid of honor, Jessica, whispered as she adjusted the cathedral-length veil. "Marcus is going to be speechless when he sees you." Sophia smiled, though something in her chest felt tight with an emotion she couldn't quite name. Perhaps it was just pre-wedding nerves, the natural anxiety that came with such a momentous occasion. She had invested everything in this relationship, emotionally, financially, and socially. Her parents had flown in from Seoul, and Marcus's prominent family had spared no expense in making this the wedding of the century. The photographer captured every moment, from the delicate placement of her pearl earrings to the final spritz of perfume. Outside the suite, she could hear the gentle murmur of 300 guests taking their seats in the hotel's grand ballroom, where thousands of white roses and crystal chandeliers created an atmosphere of pure romance. As the wedding coordinator knocked softly on the door, announcing it was time, Sophia took one last look at herself. In just 30 minutes, she would be Mrs. Marcus Williams, beginning the life she had always envisioned. Chapter 2. The Wait Begins. The processional music began with the soft notes of Pachelbel's canon, and Sophia's heart raced with anticipation as she watched her bridesmaids glide down the aisle in their dusty rose gowns. Through the slightly opened doors of the ballroom, she could see the magnificent floral arrangements and the faces of guests turning expectantly toward the back of the room. Her father, dignified in his traditional mourning coat, offered his arm with a proud smile that reminded her of all the sacrifices her family had made to give her the best education and opportunities. "Ready, my beautiful daughter?" he asked in Korean, his voice thick with emotion. Sophia nodded, clutching her bouquet of white peonies and baby's breath. As they approached the entrance to the ballroom, she could see the altar where Marcus should be standing with his groomsmen. The officiant, Reverend Thompson, stood ready with his leather-bound Bible, and the string quartet played with perfect precision. But something was wrong. Where Marcus should have been standing, there was only empty space. His groomsmen looked uncomfortable, shifting nervously and avoiding eye contact with the approaching bride. The best man, Marcus's brother David, kept checking his phone with increasing urgency. Sophia's steps faltered slightly, but her father's steady presence kept her moving forward. Perhaps Marcus was just running late, caught in traffic, or dealing with some last-minute emergency. These things happened, she told herself, even as a cold dread began to settle in her stomach. The music continued, but she noticed whispers beginning to ripple through the crowd. Guests were turning to look at each other with confused expressions, and she could see her mother's worried face in the front row. The photographer continued capturing every moment, unaware that he was documenting what would become the most humiliating experience of Sophia's life. As they reached the altar, Reverend Thompson's kind eyes met hers with an expression of gentle concern that confirmed her worst fears. Chapter 3. The Devastating Truth. David stepped forward as Sophia reached the altar, his face pale and his hands trembling slightly as he approached her. The whispers from the guests grew louder, and she could feel 300 pairs of eyes watching her every reaction. "Sophia," David said quietly, his voice barely audible over the continued murmur of confusion from the crowd. "I need to speak with you privately." Her father's grip on her arm tightened protectively, and she could see the anger beginning to build in his usually calm demeanor. "Where is Marcus?" her father demanded in accented English, his voice carrying more authority than his gentle appearance suggested. David glanced around at the watching crowd, then back at Sophia with genuine regret in his eyes. "He's not coming," he said simply, the words hitting her like a physical blow. He left a letter. The bouquet slipped from Sophia's suddenly numb fingers, the white peonies scattering across the marble floor of the altar. The string quartet, sensing the tension, gradually let their music fade into silence, leaving only the sound of shocked gasps and whispered conversations echoing through the ballroom. "What do you mean he's not coming?" Sophia's voice was barely a whisper, but in the growing silence, it carried to the front rows of guests. David pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, Marcus's familiar handwriting spelling out her name across the cream-colored paper. "He said he couldn't go through with it. He said he realized he wasn't ready for marriage, that he needed time to figure out what he really wanted." The words felt surreal, as if she were watching someone else's nightmare unfold. This morning, Marcus had texted her that he loved her and couldn't wait to see her at the altar. Now he had abandoned her in front of everyone who mattered to her, leaving his brother to deliver the devastating news. Her legs felt weak, and she was grateful for her father's supporting arm as the full weight of her humiliation began to settle over her like a suffocating blanket. Chapter 4. Public Humiliation. The silence in the ballroom was deafening as Sophia stood frozen at the altar, still wearing her perfect dress and holding the letter that contained Marcus's cowardly explanation. She could feel the weight of every gaze, the mixture of pity, shock, and morbid curiosity from the assembled guests who had come to celebrate what they thought would be the happiest day of her life. Her mother rose from the front row, her elegant composure cracking as she moved toward her daughter. Behind her, Sophia could see Marcus's parents, their faces a mixture of embarrassment and anger at their son's behavior. The expensive floral arrangements and crystal chandeliers that had seemed so beautiful moments before now felt like monuments to her naive hopes and dreams. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reverend Thompson said gently, his voice carrying the authority of years of experience with difficult situations. "I'm afraid we're going to need to postpone today's ceremony. Please give the family some privacy during this difficult time." But the guests remained seated, too shocked to move, their whispered conversations growing louder as the reality of the situation sank in. Sophia could hear fragments of their discussions, speculation about what had happened, expressions of sympathy mixed with the kind of gossip that would follow her for months. The photographer, finally understanding the situation, lowered his camera and stepped back respectfully. The wedding coordinator appeared at Sophia's side, her professional demeanor intact despite the unprecedented situation she was facing. "Miss Chen," she said softly, "would you like to go back to the bridal suite? We can handle the guests." Sophia nodded numbly, unable to trust her voice. As she turned to leave the altar, she caught sight of her reflection in one of the mirrored columns. A beautiful bride whose groom had decided she wasn't worth showing up for. The image would haunt her for years to come, a reminder of the moment when her carefully planned future crumbled in front of everyone she knew. Chapter 5. The Mysterious Stranger. As Sophia began her walk of shame back down the aisle, her veil trailing behind her like a symbol of broken dreams, a commotion near the back of the ballroom caught everyone's attention. The heavy doors opened with a soft thud, and a man entered with the kind of presence that immediately commanded the room's focus. He was tall and impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that was clearly custom-tailored, his dark hair styled with casual perfection. Everything about him spoke of wealth and power, from his confident stride to the expensive watch that caught the light as he moved. Most striking were his eyes, dark and intense, scanning the room with the calculating gaze of someone accustomed to taking control of difficult situations. The guests turned to stare at this unexpected arrival, their whispered conversations shifting from Sophia's humiliation to speculation about the stranger's identity. He moved through the crowd with purpose, his presence somehow managing to diminish the awkwardness of the moment simply by redirecting everyone's attention. Sophia paused in her retreat, something about the man's confident demeanor cutting through her fog of humiliation. She had never seen him before. She was certain she would have remembered someone with such a commanding presence. Yet he moved through the ballroom as if he belonged there. Her father stepped protectively closer to her, his instincts alert despite his own emotional turmoil. The stranger's eyes found Sophia's across the crowded room, and for a moment, time seemed suspended. There was something in his gaze that she couldn't identify. Not pity like the others, but something deeper and more complex. The wedding coordinator approached the man, clearly intending to explain that the ceremony had been canceled, but he raised a hand to stop her. Instead, he continued his purposeful walk toward the altar, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble floor in the profound silence that had fallen over the ballroom. When he reached the front of the room, he turned to face the assembled guests with the confidence of someone about to address a board meeting rather than a crowd of confused wedding attendees. Chapter 6. The Unexpected Proposal. The stranger stepped up to the microphone that had been set up for the ceremony, his movements deliberate and confident. The feedback from the sound system cut through the hushed whispers of the crowd, and every eye in the ballroom focused on him with rapt attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding rooms full of powerful people. "My name is Alexander Kim, and I believe I can resolve this unfortunate situation." Sophia stared at him in confusion, her mind struggling to process what was happening. Alexander Kim. She recognized the name from business magazines and society pages. He was the CEO of Kim Industries, one of the most successful technology companies in the country, known for his brilliant mind and ruthless business tactics. "Miss Chen," he said, turning to address her directly, his dark eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You are clearly a woman of exceptional grace and beauty, and any man who would abandon you at the altar is a fool who doesn't deserve you." The crowd murmured with surprise at his bold words, and Sophia felt her cheeks flush with a mixture of embarrassment and something else she couldn't quite identify. Her father moved closer to her, his protective instincts heightened by this unexpected development. Alexander continued, his voice never wavering from its confident tone. "I propose an alternative solution to this unfortunate situation. Miss Chen, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife instead?" The ballroom erupted in shocked gasps and excited whispers. Sophia felt the world tilt around her, unable to believe what she was hearing. This man, this stranger, was proposing to her in front of 300 guests, moments after she had been abandoned at the altar. "I know this is unconventional," Alexander said, his eyes never leaving hers. "But I believe in taking decisive action when I see something, or someone, of exceptional value." Sophia's mind raced, trying to process the surreal turn her wedding day had taken. Chapter 7. The Bold Declaration. Alexander stepped down from the altar and walked directly to Sophia, his presence somehow making the enormous ballroom feel intimate, despite the hundreds of watching eyes. Up close, she could see the sincerity in his dark eyes, along with something else, a depth of understanding that suggested he knew exactly what kind of humiliation she was experiencing. "Miss Chen," he said quietly, his voice pitched for her ears alone while still carrying to the microphone. "I know this seems impossible, but I'm completely serious. You deserve better than what happened here today, and I would be honored to give you the wedding you planned for." Her father stepped forward, his protective instincts overriding his shock. "Mr. Kim, with respect, you don't know my daughter. This is not how marriages should begin." Alexander turned to address her father with the same respect he would show a business partner. "Mr. Chen, you're absolutely right. Under normal circumstances, I would never make such an unconventional proposal. But these are not normal circumstances, and your daughter deserves to leave this room with her dignity intact." Sophia found her voice, though it trembled with emotion. "Why would you do this? You don't even know me." "I know enough," Alexander replied, his gaze returning to hers. "I know you're brave enough to stand here with grace despite being betrayed. I know you're beautiful inside and out, and I know that any man who would abandon you is making the biggest mistake of his life." The crowd hung on every word, the drama unfolding before them more compelling than any movie they had ever seen. Sophia's bridesmaids watched with wide eyes, and she could see her mother dabbing at tears with her handkerchief. "This is insane," Sophia whispered, but even as she said it, she felt something stirring in her chest. Not love, certainly, but perhaps hope. Hope that this day didn't have to end in complete humiliation, that maybe there was a way to salvage something from the wreckage of her carefully planned future. Alexander extended his hand to her, palm up, waiting for her decision. Chapter 8. The Leap of Faith. Sophia stared at Alexander's outstretched hand, her mind racing through the impossible choice before her. Behind her lay the wreckage of her relationship with Marcus, the humiliation of being abandoned, and the sympathetic stares of 300 guests. Before her stood a stranger offering salvation in the most unconventional way possible. "Sophia," her mother called softly from the front row, her voice carrying a mixture of concern and something that might have been encouragement. Her parents had always taught her to be practical, to make decisions based on logic rather than emotion. But what logic could apply to this surreal situation? Alexander waited patiently, his hand steady and his expression calm despite the magnitude of what he was proposing. There was something in his demeanor that suggested he was accustomed to taking calculated risks, that this wasn't the impulsive gesture it appeared to be. "If I say yes," Sophia said quietly, "what exactly are you proposing? A real marriage, or just a performance to save my dignity?" "A real marriage," Alexander replied without hesitation. "I don't do anything halfway, Miss Chen. If you accept my proposal, I will be a devoted husband to you. We'll figure out the details as we go, but I promise you'll never have reason to regret trusting me." The photographer, sensing the historic nature of the moment, quietly raised his camera again. The wedding coordinator stood nearby, her professional composure barely containing her amazement at the unprecedented situation she was witnessing. Sophia looked out at the crowd of guests, many of whom were leaning forward in their seats, completely absorbed in the drama unfolding before them. She thought about Marcus, probably sitting in some bar somewhere, congratulating himself on his narrow escape. She thought about the months of planning, the dreams she had invested in this day, and the future she had imagined. Then she looked back at Alexander Kim, this mysterious millionaire who had appeared like something from a fairy tale, offering her a chance to transform her humiliation into something else entirely. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. Chapter 9. The ceremony transformed. The moment Sophia's hand touched Alexander's, the ballroom seemed to exhale collectively, as if everyone had been holding their breath waiting for her decision. Alexander's fingers closed gently around hers, his touch warm and reassuring despite the surreal circumstances. "Reverend Thompson," Alexander called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making things happen. "Would you be willing to perform a different ceremony today?" The elderly minister, who had officiated hundreds of weddings in his 40-year career, looked as stunned as everyone else. "Mr. Kim, this is highly irregular. There are legal requirements, licenses. I have my legal team on standby," Alexander replied smoothly, pulling out his phone with his free hand. "They can have the necessary paperwork here within the hour. Unless, of course, Miss Chen would prefer to wait for a more traditional timeline." Sophia felt as if she were watching herself from outside her body, unable to believe she was actually considering this impossible proposition. "The license Marcus and I obtained, would that work?" "It would need to be amended, but yes, it's possible," Reverend Thompson said slowly, his professional instincts taking over despite his personal bewilderment. Alexander's legal team, apparently accustomed to their boss's unconventional requests, worked with remarkable efficiency. Within 45 minutes, they had arrived with the necessary documentation, their presence adding an air of legitimacy to what had started as the most surreal proposal in wedding history. The guests remained in their seats, too fascinated to leave despite the delay. This was the kind of story they would tell for the rest of their lives, the day they witnessed a jilted bride marry a millionaire stranger at her own abandoned wedding. Sophia's parents approached the altar, her father's expression still concerned, but her mother's eyes bright with what looked suspiciously like approval. "Are you certain about this, daughter?" her father asked in Korean. "No," Sophia replied honestly, also in Korean. "But I'm certain I don't want this day to end with me as a victim." Chapter 10. Vows of Hope. As the legal formalities were completed with remarkable speed, Sophia found herself standing at the altar once again, but this time facing a man who had chosen to be there. Alexander had removed his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves slightly, a gesture that somehow made the formal ceremony feel more personal and immediate. "Before we begin," Alexander said, addressing both Sophia and the assembled guests, I want everyone to understand that this is not a publicity stunt or a business arrangement. This is a real commitment between two people who believe that sometimes the most important decisions in life require courage rather than caution. Reverend Thompson, having recovered from his initial shock, stepped forward with his Bible. Do you, Alexander Kim, take Sophia Chen to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part? Alexander's voice was steady and clear as he looked directly into Sophia's eyes. I do, and I promise to spend every day proving that your trust in me today was not misplaced. The minister turned to Sophia, his kind eyes reflecting the gravity of the moment. Do you, Sophia Chen, take Alexander Kim to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part? Sophia's voice trembled slightly, but her words were clear. I do, and I promise to approach this marriage with an open heart and the hope that what begins in crisis can grow into something beautiful. The exchange of rings required some improvisation. Alexander's assistant had somehow procured a simple platinum band that fit Sophia's finger perfectly, while she slipped Marcus's abandoned ring onto Alexander's hand, transforming a symbol of betrayal into one of new beginning. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, the ballroom erupted in applause that was equal parts celebration and amazement at what they had just witnessed. Chapter 11. The First Dance. As Alexander leaned in to kiss his new bride, Sophia felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration that was unlike anything she had ever experienced. His lips were gentle against hers, the kiss brief but somehow meaningful, a promise of respect and patience rather than passion. The photographer captured every moment, and Sophia realized that her wedding album would tell a story unlike any other. The early photos of her preparation and anticipation, the devastating moment of abandonment, and now this impossible rescue that had transformed her humiliation into something that felt almost magical. The wedding coordinator, demonstrating remarkable adaptability, signaled for the reception to proceed as planned. The string quartet began playing again, and Alexander offered Sophia his arm to escort her to the dance floor for what would traditionally be the first dance between husband and wife. I should probably mention, Alexander said quietly as they walked, I'm not much of a dancer. I should probably mention, Sophia replied, finding herself almost smiling for the first time all day. I have no idea what I'm doing either. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. They were about to dance together for the first time as a married couple, having known each other for less than 2 hours. Yet as Alexander took her in his arms and they began to move to the gentle strains of At Last, something felt surprisingly natural about being close to him. Are you okay? He asked softly, his breath warm against her ear as they swayed together. I think so, Sophia replied honestly. This is the strangest day of my life, but somehow I don't regret saying yes. Good, Alexander said, and she could hear the smile in his voice, because I have a feeling this is going to be an interesting marriage. Around them, the guests watched with fascination, many of them still trying to process the dramatic turn the day had taken. But for Sophia, in that moment, the crowd faded away, and there was only the steady rhythm of the music and the surprising comfort of her new husband's arms. Chapter 12. New Beginnings. As the evening progressed, Sophia found herself settling into the role of Alexander's wife with surprising ease. He introduced her to guests with genuine pride, his hand resting protectively on the small of her back as they moved through the crowd. She learned that he was not only wealthy, but also kind, intelligent, and possessed of a dry sense of humor that helped her navigate the surreal situation. So, said Mrs. Patterson, one of her mother's oldest friends, approaching them with barely contained curiosity, how long have you two been secretly dating? Alexander and Sophia exchanged a quick glance before he answered smoothly, Sometimes the best relationships develop when you're not looking for them. Sophia and I connected on a level that transcended conventional timelines. It wasn't exactly a lie, Sophia realized. In the few hours since Alexander had appeared in her life, She had felt more understood and protected than she had in months with Marcus. There was something about his calm confidence that made her feel safe, even in the midst of the most uncertain situation she had ever faced. As the reception wound down and guests began to leave, each offering congratulations and expressing amazement at the day's events, Sophia found herself alone with Alexander for the first time since their impromptu ceremony. "So," she said, suddenly feeling shy, "what happens now?" "Now," Alexander replied, his expression serious but kind. "We take this one day at a time. I have a guest room in my penthouse where you can stay until you're comfortable with other arrangements. We'll get to know each other properly and we'll figure out how to make this work." "Why did you really do this?" Sophia asked, the question that had been burning in her mind all evening. Alexander was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "Because I've spent my entire life building a successful business, but I've never had the courage to take a risk on something that really mattered. When I saw you standing there, abandoned and humiliated but still holding your head high, I realized you were worth the biggest risk of my life." As they left the ballroom together, Sophia's hand in Alexander's, she realized that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin not with a perfect plan, but with the courage to embrace the unexpected. Thank you for following Sophia and Alexander's incredible journey from a day of heartbreak to an unexpected new beginning. Their story reminds us that sometimes life's most devastating moments can become the doorway to something even more beautiful than we originally imagined. What do you think about Alexander's bold decision to claim Sophia as his own? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of love, redemption, and the courage to take life-changing risks.